world, and the Telegraph's entertainment and royal correspondent, India McTaggart. A very good morning to you both. We were just discussing, weren't we, in the break there, how cold it's been, how difficult it is to get into work with bad conditions. Yeah. And that leads us quite nicely to the front page of the Daily Telegraph as the UK shivers in these sub-zero temperatures. We're hearing, according to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, 1 week's supply of gas left as the cold bites India.
Yes, exactly. So this is our splash today. And as you've said, we've all been feeling this freeze. And it's resulted in a rather worrying warning that we have just 1 week's supply left, which has, of course, raised fears of blackouts happening.
Yes.
This comes from the British gas owner Centrica. So they've said that our storage sites are 26% lower than they were at the same time last year. Amid the plummeting temperatures. I mean, we were saying it's gotten as far as minus 20 in some places in Scotland. Yeah. The company's basically warned that the UK is living hand to mouth at the moment, relying on imports whose availability and cost are uncertain. And they're pointing out also that we're an outlier as opposed to the rest of Europe. So Germany has 89 days of storage left, for example, France 103, the Netherlands 123. So for us to have 1 week is not looking good because we're also very reliant on gas still. And it just basically puts the focus on the fact that our net zero strategy and increased reliability on renewable energy sources might not be very useful in times like this because you can't store renewable energy as well and transport it.
Yeah, the paper reporting there's concerns now, Kevin, over the UK's gas reserves when it comes to renewable energy and scrutiny over the reliability of it.
Yeah, and the Conservatives, they're constantly hammering Ed Miliband over this. Obviously, Ed Miliband is a real zealot when it comes to net zero and green energy. And I know from speaking to Labour MPs as well, they're a little bit worried that Ed Miliband has basically been given free rein to really pursue this quite strongly. Great if it pays off, but if not, then, you know, as the story shows, it can leave Britain maybe potentially a little bit exposed. So politically, it's quite difficult for the government on top of everything else that they've got to worry about right now.
Not great. And the Tories are saying we need to increase reliance on nuclear and gas, right, rather than renewable, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the next week or so, conditions are set to stay pretty chilly. Yeah, according to the Met Office.
Demand is going to go up, usage is going to go up. So yeah, I mean, if this is even, you know, nearly correct, this forecast about a week's worth of storage, then it is pretty concerning, without a doubt.
Well, the other big issue on the government's to-do list is defence spending, and this takes us to the Daily Mail. Now Labour plots delay to defence boost until the 2030s.
Yeah, so Labour have been pretty vague about this. I think at the moment we spend something like 2.3% of GDP on defence. You know, Labour said that they will increase it to 2.5 at some point, so they've not put a deadline on it. They've just said, you know, we'll get there, hopefully before the next election, but certainly no hard and fast target date for it. Now, the Mail are saying this potentially could go on beyond the next election into the 2030s. And when you look at the financial situation, we know government borrowing costs are going up, that the Chancellor doesn't have an awful lot of room for manoeuvre. I can well believe that it could well be kicked into the long grass, and that's potentially even more of a worry because Donald Trump is coming in, obviously, in a couple of weeks' time as the next president of the USA, and he has talked this week of NATO members hitting 5% of GDP, which is obviously double what our target is. Now, he'll maybe settle for something like 3.5, but he's certainly not going to be happy if Labour are talking about waiting until the 2030s to even get to 2.5%. And you just think, well, where is the money going to come from? You know, but they want to cosy up to Donald Trump as best they can, and he is not going to be happy if we seen as maybe backsliding on this commitment to increase defence spending.
And with the current climate, where it is in the world and the amount of wars going on, how is this sort of also justifiable?
Well, that's the other thing, yeah, exactly. I mean, there is obviously a lot of concern, global disruption around the world, wars left, right and centre. We've got the threat from Russia, potential threat from China and Taiwan. So it comes at a time when really defence spending should be going up quite considerably, but there is not enough money. There is no money left, as someone once said.
Yeah, but it's key, isn't it, with Donald Trump, that we see time and time again, he likes to put the cat amongst the pigeons. He fires off lots of this rhetoric, I suppose, around so many different issues. But this one is going to be hard for the government to shy away from, India.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we're saying, the current climate means that it's impossible to shy away from, essentially. And if those NATO targets do happen at 5%, then how are we going to justify 2.5?
Yeah, and it comes on the back of the military has been hollowed out really over successive governments. So for a very long time, the last 10, 15 years, there's been cuts to MOD spending again and again and again, and now it's getting to a pretty critical point.
Yeah, OK, we're going to park that one now. We're going to move on to The Guardian. Grooming gang rhetoric risks inciting massacre. This is some interviews, comments by Wes Streeting, isn't it?
Yes, so Wes Streeting has given an exclusive interview to The Guardian, and I think this one is interesting because he's sort of come out and warned that the inflammatory language used over the grooming gangs could lead to atrocities in this country, like in New Zealand in 2019, the horrific mosque massacre, which killed more than 50 people. So he said that people in his constituency of Pakistani heritage are more fearful today than they were before. This obviously, follows a week where Elon Musk has brought this back into the spotlight with his tirades against the Labour government on X, which we know he's quite fond of doing at the moment. And Streeting in this interview basically seemingly took a swipe at these tweets, and he just said that the irresponsible and coarse public discourse can lead to attacks against Muslims. He also did say that political correctness should not get in the way of stating the truth of the case, because obviously we've known historically that's been a problem in this scandal. But I fear that this interview, it shows again a bit that Labour, I think, are a bit out of touch with how the country seems to be feeling now that it's back in the spotlight. And I think Musk's intervention is actually leading to a much wider debate about multiculturalism and integration in Britain. And I quite liked what Douglas Murray wrote in The Spectator this week. He says it's meant that Britain has actually had to face up to something that it's spent, a quarter of a century trying to ignore. So I think at their peril, they sort of say that political correctness should get in the way of that,
Kevin?
I mean, we've also, on the other hand, had Robert Jenrick, talk about alien cultures with medieval attitudes. And I thought it was interesting that yesterday Steve Baker, the former Conservative MP, obviously Brexiteer, on the right of the party, certainly no bleeding heart liberal, talking about that opened the door to racism, that type of language, which I thought was quite interesting. So yeah, I mean, Wes Streeting does say here, that it's he's hitting out at well-meaning but fundamentally misguided and warped views of political correctness, which maybe led to people turning a blind eye to the grooming gangs. But at the same time, we do have to be very careful about the language that we use because, you've got people here, third, fourth generation British Pakistani Muslims who feel under threat. No connection whatsoever to the grooming gangs, very proud to be British, and yet now they are being accused by someone like Robert Jenrick of, alien cultures and medieval attitudes. So I think we have to be a bit careful about the language that we use, especially if you're a high-profile politician.
Yeah, language is everything in that case. Can we move on now to... We've been reflecting this in the show, and it's Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and her trip to China. So she's heading east as the pound heads south. And how important...
Very good.
How important, yeah, but how important this trip is for galvanising growth back here in the UK is a really valid question, isn't there?
It is, definitely. And I think the timing of it, she's probably regrets that the timing looks like she's running away from this country while the economy, as you say, goes south. So it's not a great look for her, but obviously this has been planned long in advance. And for her to have pulled out at the last minute would have looked even worse because it looked like she was panicking. So that wasn't really an option. It's interesting, really, how Britain, again, we're talking about being an outlier when it comes to energy. It's been a bit of an outlier here as well because at a time when the rest of the world, certainly the rest of the Western world, is being very cautious when it comes to China because of China's sort of global ambitions. But Britain is going in the opposite direction. We're now going all out to try and, certainly as far as economically, have more cooperation with China, because we see that as an opportunity to boost growth in this country. But I think you've got to be very careful. We had an article yesterday, a couple of the new Labour MPs saying that China is a clear and present threat to clear and urgent threat to this country. So I think you've got to be a little bit careful, I think, with China's ambitions. They'll help us where they can, perhaps, as long as it doesn't affect their own interests. And it's a bit of a gamble, I think, by Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, interesting. We'll be discussing that in the next hour of the show also. I just wanted to move on to Nigel Farage and his relationship with billionaire owner of X social networking programme platform, Elon Musk. Because we saw this week, didn't we, the criticism from Elon Musk towards Nigel Farage and that ongoing fallout, potentially. Got a picture there, looking proud as punch altogether. You know, Nigel Farage is still insisting that he has huge respect for Elon Musk, calling him a hero at one of his speeches. What's your take on this, India?
Well, this was quite interesting, because obviously it was quite a dramatic U-turn by Musk. We had him pledging almost 100 million to Farage and reform in general, and then sort of saying that he doesn't have what it takes to lead reform. And obviously this, you know, follows his continued interest in UK politics at the moment. But Farage is saying that he couldn't condone what Musk said online supporting Tommy Robinson, the far-right activist, and I think he just said he wouldn't have put out that tweet saying that I am not, you know, that I am not prepared to lead reform if I had gone along with it. And he's insisting they're still friends and insisting that he still has his support and that he will not be bullied by Musk. Okay. So he's made it a sort of hard line.
They're still best of friends. We didn't quite get enough time to reflect on this, but it's a story perhaps we'll follow in the next hour. At Generation Z, finding comfort in stuffed toys. Thanks very much for your company. See you soon.
There's always more to the news.